So our first speaker is Kamau Wairuri, sorry. And his work, he's based at the Edinburgh University, and his work is concentrates, his research focuses on police violence. Our second, and I'm really trying to pronounce his name also correctly, is Jean-Baptiste Lanne. Yes? He will talk about, and I think this is a very interesting concept, the police is my brother, the hashtag. I think some of us can still remember that one. Really excited also to learn more, because this is also going into the question, who is the police, of course. And then, of course, he already presented yesterday, so we might know his face and his work from yesterday, especially what really got me yesterday about his work was the category police as a police property. I think that's something that we can really explore further. Am I explaining it correctly? Yes? Okay, cool. And that's, I'm going to pronounce it a bit English, but Jérémie Gauthier from the EHESS in Paris. Sorry, Jean-Baptiste Lanne is from the University Bordeaux, Montaigne. So without further ado, my name is Naomi van Stapele, and I'm very grateful for the organizers to organize today and also inviting me, because I didn't mention that yesterday. Very grateful for that. So please, 15 minutes, Kamau Wairuri.
Good morning all. So my presentation today is about the search for explanations for police violence. And this work that I'm going to be presenting today is fairly preliminary, because it's part of my starting points of my PhD at the University of Edinburgh on policing the urban margins, with a focus on issues of the crisis of governance in Nairobi city, police violence, and the police reform agenda. Previously, I have done research in Githurai, where I examined popular support for police violence, looking at questions of why people who are disproportionately affected by police violence also support it as a mechanism of governance and crime control. So today I want to look at perhaps what explanations we have had so far, and some of which were highlighted yesterday. See what are some of the gaps that we have there, and just possibly suggest what are the sort of questions I'll be exploring in my PhD work. So some of you will remember that in 2010, even if you don't remember the dates, it was on the 10th of March, there was a shocking incident where 4 police officers shot and killed 7 taxi drivers in Kawangware. Surely 15 minutes after. It was a very shocking incident because of the magnitude of it. Apparently it emerged from a dispute between matatu drivers and boda drivers about their location for business in Kawangware. We remember that the police got arrested, they were charged in court, but eventually they were acquitted on appeal. This was a very political case, particularly because we had 2 cabinet ministers on either side of the debate. George Saitoti, who was then Minister for Security, supporting the police, and Beth Mugo, who was the MP for Dagoretti, on the side of the community. So it attracted a lot of attention. But the case that I examined in my previous work was happened 3 years later in Githurai, where a policeman, Constable Titus Musili, who was popularly known as Katitu, shot and killed a young man called Kenneth Kimani, who had been a captain of Mathare United, but was working as in the matatu business in Githurai. This I remember very well. It was a first item in the news that evening because this was a big incident. So the family went and complained. By this time there was a IFRA, and the policeman was an arrest warrant was issued against this policeman. Kimani's brother was one of the witnesses, and he was going to be one of the key witnesses in the murder trial. And just days before Katitu was actually arrested, he shot and killed Oscar, Kimani's brother, and then he was arrested thereafter. What happened was shocking, because after Katitu was arrested, Githurai people then went on the streets for 3 days to protest against the arrest of the police officer, because they said that he is the one who was protecting them from the thugs, of which Kimani and his brother Oscar were seen to have been part of the gang that was bothering people in that community. Now, I think I've given a fairly good introduction of the cases that I'm interested in. Of course, to any external observer, this may sound like very shocking incidences, but from what we've had here yesterday and what we know about police violence in Kenya, these are not unusual. In fact, they are very, very common incidences. In 2013, for instance, it was reported that police killed 300 people in 1 year. That compared with the numbers from France, that is 10 to 15, is multiples. And we also know that in 2007, police were seen as responsible for about a third of the post-election violence deaths. This last electoral cycle was quite clear that the police exercised a lot of brutality, and the incidences we had from Kisumu yesterday were very shocking and disturbing. Now, sometimes when we talk about police violence, we often have the feeling that amongst intellectuals, academics, and human rights people, we tend to treat it as if it is necessarily something that is an aberration, like it is something that should not happen. While in actual fact, when we look at the whole essence of the establishment of the police and the origins of the police, the origins of the state, we see that violence is at the center of what the state is, and it's at the center of what the police are. And this is why there's a general acceptance of police violence as a mechanism of governance. And it is therefore important for us to clarify that we are focused on cases of police violence that can be termed as illegitimate or unlawful. That is where we have concerns, because even when you talk to people, like in my studies in Githurai, everybody has an explanation of when police violence can be justified, and therefore we need to understand what are those instances that can be termed as justified force, and which ones are out of that what we would call police brutality. But in countries like Kenya, in France, in democracies and would-be democracies, of course, police violence is a sensitive issue, because every time somebody is shot and killed, there's always somebody who's going to explain that there could have been an alternative way to do it. Now, from the conversations we've had yesterday, we know for sure that there is a disproportionate targeting of marginal groups in the society by police violence. You look at America, you see the policing of blacks. You look at Brazil, the favelas, and in the favelas in particular, the killing of young males. And Teresa Caldeira has done a lot of good work exposing this kind of dynamics. And then here also in Kenya, from what we've had in Githurai, in Mathare, in Kawangware, and such other places. Yeah? So it's, of course, important for us to try and seek explanations to this phenomenon. And it is something that has been studied extensively. And I want to just highlight a few of the arguments that have been made so far. You will be able to situate some of the things you've had in this spectrum. What I have just described about popular support for police violence, which some people have argued is the reason why police violence persists, is at the level of the structural level or the societal level. So there are some people who will argue that because police violence is supported, then it is going to continue, right? And this is a useful insight because then it creates a permissive space for the police to be able to use violence. But I find that sometimes part of the problem with that, being one of the proponents of this argument, is that it might at some point suggest that police violence is inevitable, or that it is popularly supported by everybody, right? Which is not true, because in In the case of Githurai, where the people supported police violence, in the Kawangware case, it was clear that people went to the streets to protest against police violence. So there are nuances that need to be explored. Now, at the second level, we have institutional explanations, and we had quite a lot of this yesterday. The focus here being largely on police culture, right? So especially with human rights organizations, it's a popular point to emphasize that police culture is the reason why police violence persists. And so, we talk about informal rules of the police and police praising violence. We talk about the police having biases. We talk about, as was my experience with the Githurai case, that there are cases where police officers get frustrated by the inefficiencies of the legal system and therefore decide to take the law into their own hands, police vigilantism, so to speak. And they take this as a way of bridging the gap between expectations of justice and what is actually delivered. Now, these are useful explanations again, but my argument is that until you understand what is happening on the ground during the encounter of the policeman and the victim, it is very difficult to say that police violence can be explained by the culture, because not every policeman is violent. We know that, and also police violence is not the most prevalent form of policing. Now, when we go to the lower level, which is where I think sometimes we get more useful insights, we have some arguments that focus on police officers. We had some of this highlighted yesterday. Just two examples. There is one that is called rotten apples theory, which suggests that the police are rotten apples, and it is the bad ones within them that actually engage in violent policing. But then there's another one that's even broader, which is termed as the fascist pigs theory, that the people who become police are crazy people who will undoubtedly just want to engage in violence, which sometimes is certainly not true. But I think one of the important arguments that we have not so far explored very deeply is what would be called the situational arguments about police violence. Now, this one largely rests on the idea, explanation of police behavior, and if you like, quote unquote, excuse of police behavior, by the idea that you say, oh, look, the police officers are acting in very difficult and sensitive environments. Their own lives are at stake, and they make their decisions within a split second. So it is difficult for us to try and understand or explain. Now, for me, I think there's a lot to be said about this level of argument, about the situational context. And for me, the key thing here is that these ideas of difficult, complex, risky, stressful are not things or concepts that we should take for granted, but rather they are things that need to be explained, right? So if we are saying that police officers are going to act this way because of this context, then what is it that creates that context, right? And what I'm trying to argue here is that the explanation of police violence that we can rely on has therefore to take a very nuanced understanding of the context, but most importantly of how the encounters unfold, both in time and space. In other words, we need to look at what is happening with and to the police officer before, during, and after the encounter. How do they explain what has happened? And then we also need to look at the victims and go beyond the usual descriptions where we tend to focus on showing how innocent and powerless the victims are, to actually explore and understand what are they doing before and what happens to them during the encounter. Because it is only in understanding the detailed and complexities of, sorry, I guess I need to have some more. It's only in understanding those nuances that we can start to get a good view of what police violence is, and therefore come up with proper interventions, because so far it is clear that the approaches we have taken have not been very effective. So I think I have two or three more minutes. Let me just try and explore this idea of what makes certain contexts difficult, risky, and sensitive for police officers. And this is where we go back to the debate we had yesterday about minority or disadvantaged groups, which I term in my research marginal groups, and ask ourselves why they come to be seen as dangerous people in the society. Now, we know when we talk about police in America, violent policing of the blacks, that this, or here in Kenya, policing of the poor, that there are biases that are informing police decisions, right? And we can see that clearly these biases pre-exist but do not necessarily precipitate the violence. Now, if you look at research on informal settlements from the 1970s, from before 1970s, there were a lot of arguments about how the poor people are a threat to society, partly because they have nothing to lose, or because they do not care about what they can lose or have to lose, or that they don't even understand the risk that they face. Right? Now, those arguments were very predominant in the 1960s about the person who lives in the informal settlements. And so the concept of what they are to the society, okay, 2 minutes, okay. Can be seen coming back from those arguments of the past. But then it has been challenged constantly since the 1970s that these people actually are hardworking, they build their own families, they are contributing to making the city. But it seems that these ideas have persisted, partly because, and I like what Wangoi said yesterday, because the way the state organizes life, yeah, actually produces some lives as being more precarious than others. Because we are excluding some people to the fringes of society, their own existence becomes a threat to the existence of those people that we are living as included. And there has also been arguments that then people predict social catastrophe emanating from these spaces, uncontrolled spaces, such as crime. So we will often hear that criminals are coming from these spaces, and you will see this happening a lot in Nairobi now as we are facing a crisis of mugging, because I'm sure you guys have seen this. Yeah? So because I have run out of time, I just want to suggest that this idea of what we constitute as marginality, the slum, the ghetto, and the image that it creates in the members of the society who don't live in these spaces and the police, means that the police are likely to imagine that they are more at risk when they are policing poor urban youth, especially young men, even more so than when they are policing middle-class people who might be more armed with guns, as you know is the case in Kenya today. So this is what, as I said, this is very preliminary analysis of this phenomenon. I hope we can engage and debate on those issues later. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Kamau Wairuri. Now we go to our next speaker, which is Jean-Baptiste Lanne. Please continue. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Naomi. So, good morning. First, I warmly thank the IFRA, CHRIPS, and Mathare Social Justice Center teams for having organized this meeting and giving me the opportunity to participate. So today I would like to present you one specific event I got the opportunity to witness during my fieldwork in Nairobi. And this event takes place on sunny Saturday afternoon of April 2016. And it goes by the name of, it's part of the movement #PoliceIsMyBrother initiative. And as it has been publicized, it appears as a common, this particular event appears as a common initiative organized both by the OCS, the officer commanding police station, and some community leaders coming from different parts of the city. And it was all in Kangemi slum, and it's a big slum located in the northwestern part of Nairobi. And its main purpose is quite clearly expressed by its name after an episode of police violence, in the extrajudicial killings of several youths just a week before. It's about rebuilding a trustful, at least a relationship between police and citizens. My talk is divided in two parts. First, I would like to share with you in detail the proceedings of the event, because the way this afternoon unfolds seems to be a bit paradoxical. On the one hand, it appears as, or it's introduced as something very spontaneous and casual, and on the other hand, a more careful eye will see it as highly ritualized. And in my second part, I will try to provide a reading of the symbolism displayed by both sides, police and citizens, during the meeting. And So my first, those are the two parts. Sorry. So the Police is My Brother initiative takes place in April 2016 within a context of significant tension in Nairobi, following several acts of extrajudicial killing by the police. The event is held on Saturday 23rd, closing the chapter of Bloody Week in Nairobi slums. And the Tuesday before, 8 youths have been shot dead in Mukuru slum. And 2 days after, on Thursday, 2 kids coming from Kangemi have been killed next to Globe Roundabout. And on Friday night, a community leader from Gara West calls me and tells me that something will eventually be organized on the next day afternoon. So the next day morning, I go for the meeting with the Matatu of the team Gara, in Gara West, and it was a little delegation of social workers, activists, and community leaders. And in the Matatu, it tells me more about the nature of the event. The initiative, according to him, has been supervised by the MP, and its main goal is to reconstruct an effective and trustful collaboration between police and citizen, and to say no to violence. And according to him, the meeting's program should include first a kids' football tournament, then a little speech from the OCS, and then a collective garbage collection. So we first stop at Kihumbuni ground, which is a ground generally used as a public space in the fringe of Kangemi slum. And several teams were waiting waiting there, coming from different parts of Nairobi. So you have the Westlands delegation, you have the Team Mbakasi, Team Kibera, Team Dondora. So we first all take pictures together with a printed banner, and we start singing. And the Kangemi, the Kabete OCS comes late at around 10:30 a.m., 1 hour and a half after we reach the pitch. And I have just the picture, yes, he's on the right. And is accompanied with a half dozen of policemen and women. The policemen and women are in uniform and armed with rungu and firearms. And the atmosphere seems to be very relaxed. The OCS shakes hands and makes jokes with the kids and team leaders. And a few minutes later, before the tournament starts, all kids, I counted around like 70 in number, are asked to gather in a semicircle just in the corner of the pitch. And that's where the show starts. That's here. And performing a 30-minute speech, the OCS behaves like almost like an MC. A basic sound system has been set up, and the OCS shouts in the microphone, addressing the kids. And he starts by saying, "Do you know my name? I can't hear you. Do you know my name?" And all the kids applause. Then he starts introducing one by one his police mates to the audience. So first, this lady is called this And one by one, all policemen and women step forward to say hi to the kids. After a brief moralization speech, in short, don't steal, don't mug, don't follow peer pressure, he carries on insisting on the importance of education, up to master's, he says. I want you all up to master's degree, not only from 4 but master. And he then makes some jokes with the kids, asking them, asking them, so who is Mungiki here? Who is Al-Shabaab? Who is Al-Qaeda? And the kids are laughing, and some dare to answer, I. And he says, officer, so he's joking, huh? Officer, go and harass him. I feel hungry today. And so the kids are continuing to laugh, and saving the best for last, he makes the announcement that all the kids and community leaders are invited after the tournaments to share some Fanta and cookies at the Kabete police station. So we can hear, as you can imagine, an explosion of joy and excitement from the kids. And he concludes his speech by reminding the kids to tell their parents that, yes, I have been today invited by my OCS to eat at the police station. So after the tournament, everyone, citizen, kids, and police officer participate in a garbage collection to clean the field. And yeah, I have a picture, yes, exactly. And once again, we take pictures together. And then we go together in a procession. I have also a picture. We all go by foot to Kabete police station, which is located 1 kilometer away from Kionguni ground. Brandishing our banner, hashtag police is my brother, and escorted by police vehicles which have closed the whole lane on Waiaki Way for it. So coming to the end, the last part of the afternoon takes place in the garden of Kabete police station. We attend several speeches from the OCS once again, from the OCPD, from the MCA. And the OCS invites everybody to enter and says, feel at home, feel free, you come here but not as prisoners. Then so we are invited to help ourselves with Fanta and cookies laid on the table. And the most surprising to me comes at the end, because after the lunch break, police officer give us out machetes and rakes and propose us to help them to cross the grass around the police barracks. What we actually do, without any protest, and in very bit confusing atmosphere, we separate in little groups, cutting the grass and carrying garbage up to the dumping site. So my second part will be a bit shorter. You could probably imagine how much confused I was after such an experience. By that time, I was expecting something like a riot, or at least a strong protest against what just happened the week before. And I found myself with others cutting grass at the doorsteps of police barracks. So for now, as an attempt to make sense of this, I would like to add 2 remarks on the symbolism displayed and the theatralization process during the meeting. The first one is about the kind of community the police is trying to rebuild for its own benefit. And the second one focuses on the symbolic of place, which this renewed relationship between police and citizen is built on. So first on the community, from the police perspective, this meeting appears first at first glance as a basic winning hearts and minds operation. The main goal, after a significant breach in the police-citizen relationship, the main goal is to calm down the atmosphere and the citizen. But if we take a closer look at it, we can pay attention to the efforts made by both sides in order to put these events under the sign of the community. And yeah, as countless scholars have warned against the polysemy of the term, the vacuity of the term, I think in this specific context, police and citizens seem to agree and to accommodate themselves to a quite similar definition, that the community as an extended family whose main role is to organize and reproduce the filiation process between grown-up generation and kids. In other words, the founding principle of the community here for this specific event is to are the kids. Look at the symbol is displayed by the OCS and his teammates during the afternoon. He's not addressing directly activists and community leaders, but kids. Maybe he's addressing them through the kids. So look now, it was on the previous, but it's okay, at how he's dressed. The OCS is a tracksuit, a cap. He wears a very casual look, as if he were a very ordinary father, accompanying his kids to the beach for the weekend. Several times during the meeting, he is reiterating the symbolism, like introducing himself as a father. When he talks to the kid, talks about education, about the importance of getting a degree. He supports them after along the beach. He obviously performs himself as well as a provider when he invites them for a snack. And following this set of policemen and women under his command appears as also his children and consequently big brothers and sisters to the kids. It's quite interesting to focus on the way he plays with the kids' imaginary references. As I was doing my fieldwork in another slum of Nairobi, I received plenty of WhatsApp texts, like the last one. Like largely broadcasting a stereotypic figure or generic figure of the cop as an ogre or a bogeyman. You know that this ambivalent figure of the at the same time frightening of ridiculous of the cops eating children. And the OCS, by joking with the kids, saying who is Mungiki, who is Al-Shabaab, come I will eat you, reverses this figure and turns it to an inoffensive game. I mean, we are just here for playing cops and robbers. And after a real violent episode, he resymbolizes the violence as something which should be moderate and benevolent. It's, in other words, the paternal force. Now, just 2 words from the perspective of the citizens. What's the interest for them to agree and support the symbolism of the community as a family and to include the police in this, let's say, extended family? For them, from their perspective, such a symbolism logically leads to denaturalize the legitimacy of police violence. What kind of human beings kills his own brother, indeed? And just a few words for my second remarks. It deals with the symbolism of place as displayed by both sides. And we can identify 2 symmetrical moments. First, the garbage collection with the help of the police, and at Kiambuni ground in Kangemi, and second, the cutting grass operation by the citizens at Kabete police station. And I think it's the same, let's say it's, they are those 2 moments are the symmetric side of the same theatralization process, of the same, let's say, purification metaphor. We clean your place, you clean our place. Moreover, what is at stake during this meeting is the resignification of both places, working as a resignification of the relationship between police and citizen. We come to your place, but this time not as agents of terror. You come to our place, but this time not as prisoners. To conclude, I would like to share with you some words by this community leader I came with to attend the meeting. On our way back, I asked him if he was satisfied with the way things have happened. And he answered me, it's not a very good question. It's very simple. We need this friendship. It's not a question whether I like it or not. If we start protesting and fighting, at the end of the day, this is us who will suffer. Not policemen, the barracks, but us. So I think these words speak for themselves and show the absolute asymmetry that precedes any kind of calming down operations between police and the poor citizens in Nairobi. Thank you.
Excellent time. No? This one doesn't? Yes? Does this work? Okay. Excellent time. Thank you very much. That was to say the least, an interesting encounter, I'm sure, to observe, but also to listen to this ethnographic report. Thank you. We continue now to France. How do the French think about the police? Jérémie.
Yes. Thank you. Good morning, everyone. I hope you're fine. Once again, I would like to thank all people who took part to the organization of this conference. As you said, I will now change the focus. We will now be in France, and I won't be mentioning ethnographic surveys or things like this, but I will concentrate on some big scale survey in France and Europe, and trying to answer the question: what do the French think of their police? And maybe doing that, it will, I don't know, broaden the focus, because I guess we focused until now on the relationship between the police and marginalized poor people. Maybe this will give some insight in what broader population think about the police. As an introduction, I will say that for now in France we don't have a lot of data about what the people think of their police, meaning quantitative data in comparison to the US or the UK, for example. And because like producing data about trust in the police, about what people think about the fairness and justice and how the police is doing its work and so forth and so on, is influenced by a theoretical current, which is the procedural justice. The main academic, the main scientist who brought this procedural justice theory was an American guy named Tom Tyler, who wrote in the 90s a book called Why People Obey the Law. So the question is why, meaning also how people do obey the law. And the idea of procedural justice is that the most important is not the outcome of policing and of justice. The most important is fairness and the idea that the people have on fairness of procedure. The whole idea is that the police must learn and must be fair and polite and have good interactions with people, and then the people will trust the police. This will increase legitimacy, and this will increase obedience. So this is all theory to understand why people obey to the law. And this theory was a major reason for police reform in the US in the 70s and the 80s, and also in the UK, and was like foundation of this whole idea of community policing. So what do we know about France and about trust and feeling of justice and fairness, discrimination from the French people and their police? I will begin with some European surveys so that we can situate France in Europe. One of the biggest survey is called the European Social Survey, which shows that France, in comparison to other European countries, is quite low as far as positive opinion after a police encounter is concerned, as far as justice and fairness of police officers' decisions, as far as the idea of respect shown by police towards citizens, as well as trust in justice. And another interesting result of the survey is that it's not only the citizens that have a low trust in their police comparing to other European countries, it's also policemen who have the lower level of trust in their own population or towards the French citizens. So there is a mutual distrust between the police and their French people. Okay, this was like European level. Now, when we look at the national survey, since the 80s, the national survey, not comparative, show that the level of trust in the police in France is quite high. When we not compare to other countries, in the national surveys, the level of trust is quite high, and it reaches higher point in 2015 after 3 police officers were killed by terrorists. One of the last surveys showed that 80% of French people trust their police. Before going further, I will to compare. I found some statistics about Kenya. Yeah, in an article you sent to us, Marie, from Anneke Ose, which showed the very low trust and confidence in the police in Kenya. I mean, 36% confidence in the police in 2014, 11%, or 40%, only 14%, a lot of trust in the police, versus 33% no trust and in the IFRA barometer. Can you go, please? Yeah. No, I go back to France, and I will try to explain what a colleague of us, Fabien Jobard, named the paradox of trust in the French police. Like I said, if we look at the national survey, the trust in the French police is quite high, but when we look a bit closer, this high level of trust is an abstract opinion about the existence of the police as an institution. If we ask the people further about their concrete experiences with the police, the trust in the police is decreasing. For example, in 2017, 25% of the respondents think the police is not here when needed, and this percentage increased to 40 in the department of Saint-Denis, which is one of the poorest, department close to Paris, and one of the poorest, if not the poorest department of France. The other thing behind, in general, high level of trust, to explain this paradox of trust, is that the trust is decreasing when you look at 2 specific groups of the French population, meaning the youth and the minorities. Yeah. Thank you. So, respondents under 30 years old have less trust in the police than the other ones. Trust of the police is lower by young boys, than by young girls. And trust in the French police strongly decrease when youngsters get older. You have 2 statistics over here. And respondents from poor families, less educated, social housing, underprivileged neighborhoods have less trust in the French police. Another group that mistrusts the police in France are minorities. I took 2 surveys, the European Social Survey again, and another big survey from the European Agency for Fundamental Rights, shows that minorities have less trust in the police than the majority group, like 58% versus 73%. And the other survey from the European Agency show that some difference between groups. Again, majority by 60% of trust, and then North African 48 and Sub-Saharan 30. So it's rapidly decreasing considering those groups. What explain this feeling in this kind of surveys? To be treated with respect during stop and search interaction. As you show here, again, there is a large gap between the majority group and the North African and Sub-Saharan group. And here the Sub-Saharan, I mean French people with Sub-Saharan origins, only 27% think that the police treated them with respect during stop and search. This is the lower rate in the European Union, all groups consider. And again, when we look at other encounters than stop and search, we still have like a gap between representations, but the level of the feeling to be treated with respect by the police is way higher. And once again, as we said yesterday, it shows that this police practice, stop and search, is a major reason of distrust and violence between police and the French population, and above it, the French youngsters and minorities. I would like to go now to a survey I did with some colleagues in Paris, which is the EHESS Préface. It's a national survey about what the people think of the state in general, and we are trying to compare 4 institutions: fiscal administration, educational system, justice, and the police. These results are quite new, actually. I had them a few weeks ago, and they are interesting to my opinion. I don't know yet really what I can do with that, but maybe you will help me to find some idea. Okay, we asked above all, do you think that the civil servants of this administration are doing a good job? Yes. Are doing a good job, and this is scale. Like 1 is the lowest rating, and 10 is the best. And what we show here, it's like the best rating goes to the police, compared to justice, educational system, and fiscal administration. Then when we ask people, do you think that these civil servants are treating people equally, yes or no? Again, it's the police that have the best results, so to say. I mean, French people do believe that police is not treating people equally, even if they think that they are doing a good job and the best job compared to other institutions. And then when we ask our respondents, why do you think these civil servants are not treating people equally? Then when we have a look at the police, we see that the origin and the look, the appearance, the color of the skin, comes as the first reason why people think that the police doesn't treat people equally. So that's why can you go back? I've asked this question there: do the French people appreciate an unfair police? I think it raised a question about democratic feeling and about what the French people perceived as a democratic police, and this kind of result matches with some other surveys. Opinionway here 2014 that show that 63% of the respondents think that the French police use abusive stop and search and treat people differently according to their origin. So I think there is here one more paradox of this opinion toward the police. It's like in France we seem to like an unfair police, and yeah, I think I will need to go further to this survey and to of course to go further into social groups and age and so on. But I think it's already an interesting and probably a sad result. Thank you.